Aurelia, welcome to the People of Purpose talk show, and I'm very honored to have you as my highly esteemed guest today.
Well, good morning from my side. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm really excited to chat a little bit more about my life and about science and all the bits and pieces that go into making this journey exciting. So, yeah, thank you so much for having me and thank you for your kind words. I really appreciate it.
You have many accolades and achievements to your name for somebody so young. Did you have a childhood dream that this would be your life?
It's really interesting that you asked that because for as long as I can remember, I don't really know when it started, but I dreamt of having a PhD. I don't know that I really understood what it was going to be in or how I wanted it to be. And I don't actually recall how I came up with this, but I remember that I dreamt about wearing the infamous red gown and the hood, um, as most girls dream about their wedding day. That for me was a point of excitement. I think I'd always characterized myself as an academic. I liked to prioritize my academics, and I had so much support from my parents in this regard. So for me, I did sort of see going into academia as something that I would do. However, when I started off, I don't think I had picked chemistry in my mind as the journey I would take. So, in short, yes, I did have a dream, but not all of the details to it. So, I was always fascinated with science. To be honest, I was fascinated with puzzles. And as a young child, I was quite literally obsessed with puzzles. My mom and I would build puzzles quite rigorously. We would frame them, and they are now adorned all across the walls in our home. And it was just wanting to get that final piece in, wanting to solve it and work out the bigger picture. And for me, the older I got, the more I realized that science is actually a puzzle, and that every day it's basically about trying to find the right piece to make it a pretty picture at the end of the day. And so I started off with the love of puzzles, but I also loved to watch the show called NCIS with my dad. And there was a particular character, her name was Abby, and she used to do the analytical side of things, the analysis and all of those things. And we know that some of these crime dramas are a little bit off from the reality of things, but that was my first taste of, oh, that's something interesting. I want to do that. And so when I started my career, I started with an undergraduate in biochemistry. And it was because I wanted to be just like Abby and I wanted to go into forensics. But along the line, I was exposed to different kinds of subjects and chemistry. And I had the support that showed me that chemistry was going to be a better journey for me than choosing biochemistry or perhaps forensic science. And so that's how I ended up on this road. When I was in preschool, in fact, my report once said that Aurelia would rather sit inside building the puzzles and playing outside. That changed when my younger brother was born. He kind of pulled me outside to play with him. But
Play with him.
my love for puzzles started when I was really young. And like I said, my mom supported me in that. And it grew to the point where we had an entire kit on how we would do our puzzles. We'd separate it based on border pieces and then colors and specific features. We had those sort of Tupperware lunch boxes that have the different compartments, and we'd put the pieces in there.
Yes, yes, I remember.
And sometimes we'd even hide the last piece from each other so that we would compete to see who could put in the last piece. And we got to the point where we'd also write in the number of hours that it took us to complete the puzzle. It just became a really fun, competitive, not in a aggressive way, but like a very fun, loving, competitive thing to do that we would try to improve our time collectively to build the next puzzle faster than the previous one. So it really was an exciting time with building the puzzles. Yeah.
And the education started out at home.
I suppose, yeah, I could say that. I think when we were going through it in the moments, I didn't realize the impact that would have. But I think in hindsight, it clearly showed a very type A analytical mind. And so my mom is a teacher, so I
Mhm.
wonder if she did maybe pinpoint all of these things and decide to nurture it accordingly. But yeah, it definitely was a first start of sort of an experiment of sorts to see how fast we could do the puzzles, um, and definitely a stepping stone towards where I ended up now.
You were born in South Africa, yet you went to live in Swaziland, now known as Eswatini. How did that transition in your young life prepare you for the life that you have now?
So I moved to Swaziland, Eswatini, sorry, when I was 14 months old. My dad got a job there, and so we moved over. And In the beginning, I don't really remember much about the initial years of being in Swaziland. I know that we travel quite frequently between Eswatini and then KZN to visit family. And so I remember, being in the car quite a lot and going back and forth. But one of the key things that I take away from my experience of having grown up in Swaziland was just how unique our childhood was. We were
Mhm.
really allowed to be children. It was such a simple and really pure way of living. We played outside till the lights came on. We had this collective environment. So we were really privileged enough to have lived in a secure complex. So we also had that advantage. But we grew up playing outside, being in the dirt. We had a jungle gym and we'd be outside for hours. My brother and I used to bake mud cakes for my mom. And it really was this kind of thing where we were allowed to just be children. I know that for a lot of people my age, having grown up in South Africa, maybe their childhood wasn't necessarily the same. But I think one of the key themes that resonates with a lot of us who've grown up in Swaziland was the ability to really just enjoy your childhood. And in being there, we were also exposed to so many different cultures. So I was really privileged enough to have gone to Waterford Kamhlaba, which is a United World College, and is a really diverse school. There's students from quite literally all across the globe. And over and above being exposed to different cultures, that for me was an experience of learning about people from so many different places. I went into boarding school for the first time when I was in grade 8, and that really helped me to become more independent. I really developed quite a lot as a child, but also just being in this space that was integrated with so many different people, personalities, cultures, cultural backgrounds. From a really early age, you start to learn that sort of cultural communication, how to be able to be agile in different situations. And I think that really shaped the ability for me to survive in diverse spaces. My parents also traveled quite a lot with us as kids. We went to many different parts of South Africa. We were able to explore nature. They had a real love for nature and wildlife. And we also traveled internationally. And this travel internationally was one of the things that I suppose was the first time that travel bug bit me, and I think I've just had wanderlust ever since. But it was always being exposed to new cultures, and my dad always insisted that he would travel with my brother and I. So we'd go as a family of four on all of our holidays. They didn't leave us behind, and because of this, we were exposed to so much. And I can't begin to explain how grateful I am for that because it really started off young in that appreciation of different
Mhm.
cultures and different perspectives. And I really learned something new on all of my travels. When I was in grade 8, we traveled to India and we traveled across India for about 3 weeks, moving from starting off in Mumbai down to Bangalore,
Mhm.
Chennai,
Mhm.
and then all the way up to Delhi. And it was really such an interesting time just to be able to see the different parts of India. And we were able to travel back to the village that my father's family came from when they journeyed to South
Wow.
Africa. And that was such an amazing experience. I think I was a bit too young to fully take it all in. But when I look back at it now, I realize what a profound moment it was to be able to have that opportunity to trace our roots and to go all the way back, but just
Mhm.
also to go and to experience the motherland, for lack of better words. I think the other thing was interesting because for a lot of the trip, we had to explain to people where Swaziland was. And then we had to explain to people that we were Indian with descendants from, India, and that yes, we were in Africa, but we're still Indian. And it was such an interesting time. You just realize how big and how diverse the world is, and
Mhm.
how sometimes these really critical things fall through the cracks, and then even people in India were unaware of indentured labor, for example. So,
Mhm.
really interesting experience. And as a whole, I think being able to go out and to see different cultures really did help me make the decision that I wanted to move out and to explore different parts of the world.
That's beautiful. And I think that experience also helped for you to develop into this unique human being. You are different, yet not so different
Yeah.
because of those experiences. Look, you're very privileged because it's costly. How would you advise young children or someone, perhaps at university, watching you right now and wanting to be like you and explore the world like you have?
So I suppose, as you mentioned, travel is definitely a very privileged experience. And I know that my answer comes from a place of immense privilege. But there's a very common saying that travel now because you will never get the time again and you'll never be this young without as many responsibilities as you have now. So travel now because money can always come back. And I understand that for some people that may not necessarily be the case, but travel can be in something as small as going to your nearest game reserve, going to a part of South Africa that you haven't been to before. You
Marvelous.
always start locally. As a country, there are so many diverse spaces to go to, and there's so many parts of the country that even as South Africans, we haven't even been to. So,
Marvelous.
my advice would be to start small and to start within your budget. I'm not advocating for financial irresponsibility, but there's something that I always joke about, and I always say that I compare the cost of certain things to a plane ticket. So, for example, in needing to upgrade a new phone, I've needed a new phone for a while now, but the cost of a new phone was the cost of a plane ticket home. And so I rationalize it in that sense that, oh, I could rather go and see XYZ place or do the ABC, and that would be better than something else. So there's always a way for you to be able to save.
Yes.
And if possible, save as much as you can, but start locally and then build towards going somewhere internationally. And also, don't be afraid to take risks. I know travel is very risky, and as a female, it's exceptionally dangerous to be able to travel. But try and do so in a safe space, in group travels, group trips, things like Kontiki or Top Deck. Those are
Mhm.
all really good
Mhm.
examples. Or also reach out to people that you may know. You know, sometimes we all have this dream and we're not ready to act upon it. But the moment you have someone else that's willing to do so, then that's something that you can go ahead and do. One of the first trips that I took without my parents was in fact on a top deck tour with a friend of mine. We spoke about it in passing and said, "Oh, I'd really like to do a top deck." And then she said, "Okay, I'd do one with you." And I didn't take her serious initially. And eventually we ended up doing a top deck and spent 8 days in Bali. And it was one of the best trips ever. And that was the start of all of my solo-ish adventures to come.
Beautiful.
So
And did you make a lot of friends?
I did, yeah, I really did. So because it was a group trip, you travel around with a group of between 20 to 30 different people, people from different parts of the world, and you get to meet so many people who are on so many different parts of life, and it's really interesting. And yeah, I do still keep in contact with some of the people from the trip, which is really great.
Oh, travel in your own country. How has that benefited you as a South African and someone who lives in Eswatini?
I would say it's greatly benefited me, especially the rich history that South Africa has. So one of the earliest trips I can remember is going to Mpumalanga and looking at Sodwala caves and seeing the paintings and all of those things. And then if you tie in with some of the paintings that there are in Eswatini, you start to piece together the history that exists. And I just think that as South Africans, we have so much to be proud of. And as a country, I think we've seen with the World Cup how we can really come together. And when you go to these places, it really fills you with a sense of pride for just how far the country's come. So I would really advocate for going out to the different parts of South Africa, the different scenic routes. Cape Town is always amazing. There's so much to do there in terms of the food scene and the music scene and lots of different things. So I think there's really something for everyone across South Africa. You just need to be able to do some Googling.
Well, that's the thing. I advocate for local travel a lot. I see it as part of my activism as well because we have an amazing country. There is a world in here. If you look deep enough, well, not so deep actually, there is a world in here. And I'm very fortunate in that I got to see the whole map of South Africa. I experienced every town, city, little nook and cranny that very few people have seen. I have, that has been my life experience. I've seen it all. And I love this land. And I suppose I was blessed because of my husband's work. I traveled with him. And I got to see parts of the country very few South Africans even know exist. And I met people and I had the opportunity to engage with people as well in my own country. And that's when I decided, oh, this is the world. And before I knew it, the world opened up to me. And then I started to share parts of this land with the world. And people are amazed because stereotypes are built on what people don't know. Do you think that gratitude is a gold mine for success? And how has giving thanks and just being grateful helped you in your life?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I cannot agree with that anymore. A family friend, Grandpa Pop, he is a pastor and family that have basically taken us in Swaziland. He has a saying that has stuck with me ever since I was in primary school. And Grandpa always says that your attitude will determine your altitude and that we must always have an attitude of gratitude. And it's really, really stuck with me. I've taken it wherever I've gone. And in my family, I've been so blessed to have such strong prayer warriors who practice this attitude of gratitude. You know, I've watched my dad, amidst all the hurdles in life, always have an attitude of gratitude and always give thanks to God for what he's had. And so I will admit sometimes I am a bit ungrateful for the blessings that I have. And I think that sometimes when we're going through difficult scenarios, it's hard to remember that you are standing in an answered prayer. And in fact, last night before I prayed, I just had a moment to say to God, you know, thank you. This is where I wanted to be months ago. This was the prayer that I had put forth, and I'm so grateful that I am here. Yes, it's a difficult journey, and maybe there are a few of the battles I would have rather not fought, but thank you, God, that I'm here. And I think that if we all practice gratitude, I know it sounds very cliche, but in practicing gratitude, we really become more aware of all the blessings that we have and all the privilege that we have. I started an exercise in COVID because I was stuck in the UK in the midst of COVID doing a PhD and I wasn't able to go home. And so I had a running joke that said that doing a PhD in a foreign country in the middle of a global pandemic was like participating in an extreme sport that no one would insure you for. And sometimes your mental health really does slip. And it can be very tough because you're far away from those that you love. You don't know when you'll see your family again. I mean, I don't really have to explain how difficult COVID was. But for me, something that really helped me stay grounded was a gratitude journal. And I found an app online that I kept on my phone. And every night before I'd go to sleep, I would fill out the app. And even on the days when it was tough and I didn't feel like I had anything to be thankful for, the app had different prompts. It would ask you, the main prompt was, what are you grateful for today? And if perhaps you couldn't answer that, then it said maybe, what sound are you grateful for? Or what memory are you grateful for? And who are people who've helped you? And as you
Wow.
go through the prompts, you start to realize that yes, perhaps today was a difficult day, but it's only a day and it's not my entire story. And even in the difficulties, there's still things I can be grateful for. So sometimes my journal entries are as simple as, I'm grateful for the fact that I had strength to make it through the day because
Wow.
have a chronic illness, endometriosis, and it became really
Oh,
difficult to get through the day.
wow.
And so just being able to say, I'm grateful, God, that you gave me the strength to wake up this morning. It may sound simple and really silly to others, but some days can be a really tough health day. Some days I couldn't go into the lab because I couldn't walk. I was in so much pain. And just being able to
Mhm,
say, thank you, God, that I could wake up. I could go to
mhm,
the lab. I could set up my experiment. That's more than enough. And I think sometimes we feel like gratitude has to be this grand thing. We need to be
mhm.
grateful for these massive blessings, a new car, a new home. But
Yes.
simply waking up and having breath for the new day, or the fact that your parents are still alive and they're in good health,
Yes.
my grandmother's still alive. These are things that we maybe take for granted, but are definitely things that I can reflect on at the end of the day and say, thank you, God, for your blessings. So I definitely think that
You've
gratitude.
just touched on the endometriosis, and I've read about your journey with it on your blog. Um, will you just like to talk a little bit more about that and let people know where they can read more about that part of your story? Because if there is someone out there who is experiencing this illness, uh, I just found reading your blog very encouraging.
Thank you. I appreciate
Very
that.
encouraging. And I love your outlook to life because you have, there is no doubt you do have a high emotional intelligence. So therefore you are applying it to your analytical life in a very meaningful way. And I do think that you have the potential to help millions of people. So tell us about your endometriosis journey.
Oh, yeah, sure. So, endometriosis is diagnosed as a silent chronic illness, and they call this the case because it's not often spoken about, and sometimes the symptoms are not very obvious. Endometriosis is a gynecological issue that will affect 1 in 10 women, and I am 1 in 10. I was diagnosed with endometriosis when I was 20, and shortly after that, I was put on hormone replacement therapy for 6 months, which was during the time when I was doing my final year of my undergraduate degree. And it was the worst 6 months of my life. It was very, very draining. Essentially, it depletes your hormone levels to stop the overwhelming growth of the endometrium, which, as endometriosis is the growth of the endometrium outside of the uterus. So it causes immense pain. Some of the symptoms include chronic fatigue. And this is the kind of thing where you've slept for 8 or 9 hours, but you still can't get up in the morning because everything is just too painful. And there were days when it just felt like the duvet was too heavy to move. And I would have slept 8 hours the night before, but it was just because I had chronic fatigue. Sometimes the pain can be unbearable. I'm very grateful that my pain hasn't caused anything um, drastic in my life so far, but I do know of women who've passed out in pain or who frequently have to go to the emergency room. The endometriosis can, or endometrium can grow on different organs and can affect your organs. Women have had to have sections of their colon removed, and it really does affect your life as a whole. So it's more than just a gynecological issue. It does affect your mental health quite substantially because one of the parts of endometriosis is the question about fertility, which a lot of women really struggle with. There's also the aspects of how it affects your daily life in terms of food intolerances, the fatigue, as I mentioned, bloating, just general discomfort. And with me, my endometriosis journey has really been uh, a learning journey. A lot of this is also tied into how I've found gratitude in things, the simple things in waking up for the day. I'm definitely better at coming to terms with where I am now. I'm currently on a surgery waiting list to have a laparoscopy done, which is done to be able to determine what stage of endometriosis you are and the extent of the disease in your body. It's also helpful for medical treatment going forward. At this point, there is no treatment for endometriosis, only means to manage your symptom. And whilst this is really difficult, I am grateful for scientific breakthroughs and for the research being done. But I do believe that more research needs to be done on this disease so that it can support more women.
Most women are silent, embarrassed. They share in their own circle, not so vocal like you are. And of course, you're a scientist. You share with in depth knowledge, like I read on your blog. So, my own journey with infertility started with a pregnancy, which we lost many years ago in the early years of our marriage. And it was only then, after we had the miscarriage, that we discovered, oh, we're not falling pregnant, but why? And we went to various doctors, and, you know, and everybody was talking at that stage, do the fertility treatment. My first experience of hospital was when I had the miscarriage. So I'm a little queasy about these things, So, well, I was then. And it was like, I said to my husband, if God wills it, we will have the child. We have a whole life ahead of us. Let's see what happens. But I don't want to do that. And he said, I don't want to do it either. Let's travel and have fun and enjoy our lives. Let's explore
Okay.
that part of our lives. Let's develop in another direction. And if God wills it, we will see, what happens with this. And it never happened until one day we looked at each other and we said, I don't think it's going to happen for us. Maybe some couples will think we're crazy because some people actually believe you cannot have a life if something so big goes wrong with your life, because
Yeah.
that's actually how society sees it.
Oh, yeah,
So
definitely.
we decided, yeah, we came to this crossroad, and my husband Gavin and I, we decided, okay, God has given us a different kind of power, the power of choice. And our choice is to choose not to let this destroy what we have that's so beautiful. So let's develop in the other direction. And still, even though we're older, we're getting close to the Abraham and Sarah years. So let's see what God does. Maybe He'll just slip in this miracle. And it never happened. But that was our choice to be obedient in that direction. And we we used our resources, which would have been channeled into fertility treatments,
Mhm,
into other aspects of our lives. We reached out to other people. We helped. We sort of believe in legacy,
mhm,
that it's not just your own, and it doesn't just have to come out of you. We've channeled this pain into our joy.
Yeah.
Now, I've seen you do that. And you're very young, you have many years to overcome this. And with your faith, who knows where God will take you. But however it turns out for you, just by what you've shared with me, I can tell that you're equipped to handle however it turns out.
I want to say before I answer that question, thank you so much for sharing that with me. I know that it's not always easy to talk about it, and I feel exceptionally honored that you said this is the first time you've shared it on a show. So thank you for trusting me to speak with me about this. I really appreciate that you've shared this with me. And I wanted to say that I'm just so in awe of how you and your husband have dealt with the entire situation. I imagine it was very difficult. I like that you've touched on the fact that society doesn't make it any easier, that even now people are still asking. And I think that in this journey, I think that that is perhaps one of the hardest things that people are dealing with. It's not something that I have personally had to deal with thus far, thank God, but I am in quite a few support groups, and I know that a lot of women speak about the fact that they're in a marriage or they're getting a bit older, and people are starting to question why they don't have kids, and it is an extremely insensitive question. It's definitely not part of anyone's business because they're not part of that relationship as a whole. But it's extremely insensitive for the fact that you have no idea what the couple is going through, or what hurdles they're trying to deal with. And also, sometimes having a child is not for everyone. And I think that, like you've said, you were obedient to what God wanted for you and for your life. Not to say that God didn't view you as a mother, but this is not the journey for you, and you had come to terms with it. And I think that sometimes when people ask these questions, they don't realize that we all have personal choices to make.
And
And so,
different
yeah.
journeys. And it doesn't make you less of a woman. No, it doesn't.
Oh,
It doesn't.
no.
We're still nurturers, and we still can have a legacy. Aurelia, tell me, what brings you joy in life?
So it's really silly. It's a very easy question, but also a very difficult question to answer at the same time. But when I think about it, I think my top three would have to be um, family, adventure, and food. And these have really charted the course for my life and the direction that it's taken. So, adventure, although most people wouldn't see it this way, especially when you tell people you've done chemistry and they say, oh, it was my worst subject in school. Chemistry, in and itself, has been an adventure. Being a scientist means waking up and going to work every day and quite literally asking the question, why? Why is my solution blue? It was pink when I left it yesterday. Why are the crystals red? The paper said it was going to be white. Why is there nothing in my round bottom flask? It really is an adventure. You have no idea what's going to happen the next day. Well, you do sometimes, but for the most part, you don't, and you don't know why that's going to happen. But chemistry has been a great adventure. The other aspect of adventure has been travel, which is quite literally an adventure in itself. And as you mentioned, I've been so privileged to be able to travel to 30 different countries, which has just been so phenomenal. I've always been looking for the next adventure, but also looking for places that can enrich me. So, going to different places very specifically for things that I had wanted to achieve. I'm grateful that I've traveled not only for pleasure and with friends, but I've also traveled for my work and for my academics. Last year, I traveled to the US where I presented my PhD research at a conference in California, and that was such an amazing experience. I was able to spend 7 days in California learning from other scientists in my field, and as a whole, that was just so beneficial to my career because I was able to make such valuable connections that actually helped me finish my PhD. Individuals who supported me when I had questions on aspects of my science that I didn't understand. And so, adventure as a whole has really been a part of my travel. It's also taken me to life in China, where I spent a year teaching English after my master's, a completely different road from where my I thought my life would be, but I just realized that I'd wanted a little bit of an adventure, something different, something to characterize my life by other than just having the title of scientist. In terms of food, well, I think that goes without saying. Food definitely brings me joy. I am definitely a big foodie. However, I will admit that my favorite snack is buttered toast and Milo. I don't think there's anything quite
Oh,
like it.
I like
Um,
mine with a coffee or tea.
has to be that way. And also, there's nothing like Mari biscuits in this world, and it has to be the original flavor. So,
Oh,
definitely a big foodie, but also definitely still so happy with the simple things in life.
mm,
Popcorn, if
mm,
you ask anyone that knows me, popcorn is my vice because I eat popcorn a bit too much and it's starting to affect my teeth. But popcorn really
mm.
does bring me joy. And the last part of it is family. And as I've touched on briefly, I've been so blessed to have had such a amazing supportive family. So the four of
Mhm,
us, my parents and my brother and I are quite close, having lived in
mhm,
Swaziland, just the four of us. It's been amazing. But my maternal grandparents were also a big part of my childhood. My grandfather unfortunately passed away when I was quite young. But I was
mhm,
also very grateful to have had my maternal great grandparents. And my granddaughter was a phenomenal part of my life. And just a phone call with him brought me so much joy. He is the kind of person who will track you down literally no matter where in the world you are.
mhm,
Time
mhm,
zones sometimes got to him. So when I was in China, he was about 96 when I left. And he would get the time zone so mixed up. And sometimes I'd be in the lab and I'd have to answer and say, Granddaughter, I can't speak to you now. I'm in the lab. But he passed away in 2019, and I still really miss his calls. But family
mhm,
and being able to spend time with family really brings me joy. And I'm so grateful to have had a family that has quite literally gone to the ends of the earth to China to spend time with me and to be with me. And
mhm.
my dad said that thanks to me, they've gone to see some really random places. But I'm so grateful that they are the kind of family that will go out of their way to be there and to support you. And in fact, they arrive in 2 days' time to be at my graduation, and my gran is 76 years old, and she's been saving up her pension money to come to my
Wow.
graduation. And I can't tell you the amount of joy and
Mm.
gratitude that fills my heart with. So, yeah,
You come from a wonderful, uh, a multi-generational family. You're very fortunate to have your gran, and you was this your grand your Tata was your great
my great granddad. Yeah, so
your great granddad, right?
my maternal great granddad.
So he was your grandfather. Is that how
Yeah,
you referred to him? Your
yes,
grandfather. And how beautiful that you had the kind of relationship where he
yeah,
called you in China, even at the wrong time, or
yes,
wherever he called you, he called. But the thing is, he called.
yes,
That's special.
yes,
The older members of your family are so interested in such a positive way
yes,
about your life. I find that very inspiring.
yeah,
And that your grandma, she saved up her pension to
yeah.
travel to England for your graduation. I
She's
mean
at
that.
every phone call we've had since I started PhD, she'd remind me that
um,
she's coming to be in the cathedral. She's going to be there, and every time, even when it got tough in COVID, she said, "No, Ma, I'll see you. I'll be there." And I
oh,
think that was really just something that got us going through the difficult
yes,
times. Is having
yes.
that to hold on to that. When I finish, it's not just my PhD; it's for everyone.
It seems that distance does not affect your family.
So my undergraduate, my bachelor's degree, I was grateful enough to have had my grandmother there. And then
Mhm.
the family that I mentioned earlier, Grandpa Pop and Grandma Cynthia, they were there in attendance. For my honors graduation, my gran was also there. Unfortunately, I didn't attend my master's. So yeah, it's now for my PhD graduation, the final one.
What does it mean to be a member of the Golden Key Honor Society? Would you like to tell me about that?
Sure. So the Golden Key Honor Society, as mentioned, is an honor society that was based at the University of Pretoria, or I know that they do also have chapters in the United States. And
Mhm.
in essence, it is awarded to the top 15% of individuals in their faculty. And so I was really grateful to have been awarded this whilst I was in my honors year. So I was invited to be part of Golden Key in 2014. And so being part of this has been a really interesting journey. I'm really grateful for the honor as well. And I think it also just really encouraged me further, I would say, in my academics. So being able to achieve this honor for all effort I put in for my academics and being able to have had that, it was just something to keep me going for further academic.
Oh, that's marvelous. And obviously, it will grow your work globally as well. because it has an international sphere to it. So, where in the world, other than China and the US, and of course the UK, which is where you're now living, where else in the world has your work gone?
So I did a lot of national work when I was at the CSIR for my master's. I presented research in Johannesburg and then also in Limpopo at different conferences. So I was grateful to do that. Unfortunately, with the rest of my research during PhD, there was COVID, so we were very limited in terms of the conferences that we were able to
Mm-hmm.
attend. So I'm very grateful though during COVID I was able to be part of a conference known as EFEMS, which was directed at women in STEM across Africa, and this was a virtual conference hosted with women across Africa. So as a whole, I'm grateful, as you've mentioned, for the different parts that I've been to. But I think also in terms of our research papers as a whole, it's very hard to quantify where exactly they've gone. I do know that there have been researchers in India who've reached out to us from our work, and then also quite recently in Japan. So with the world of academia, I think as soon as you publish anything, it's open to the rest of the world, and that's a great privilege to have.
What is the Miss Earth essay pageant all about? And how has that influenced your life?
So, Miss Earth South Africa is a women's leadership program that was started by two phenomenal sisters, Catherine Constantinides and Ella Bella Late. And Miss Earth started 20 years ago. In fact, I was privileged enough to have attended the 20th gala this year. And Miss Earth is really a platform for young women to be able to develop their skills towards social justice, climate change, climate advocacy, and really be able to go into communities and make a change. So,
Mhm.
through Miss Earth, I started this journey whilst I was doing my master's at the CSR, so in 2017. And I was able to do so many different projects in different fields of climate advocacy and climate justice. So, both Catherine and Ella themselves are phenomenal climate activists, and Catherine has been all across the world with her work with the UN, as has Ella. And they both are such inspirational women, which is why being part of this program was so great. They really inspire you because they are the kind of women that would go out, get their hands dirty, quite literally. We would do different cleanups in communities, but all in the name of advocating, educating, and greening our communities. So through Miss Earth, some of the, I wouldn't say challenges, but rather some of the projects that you get involved in would be going out into communities and really teaching them about the three R's, reduce, reuse, recycle.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
hosting different kinds of green campaigns with that. We'd also go out and do different cleaning projects. I'm very grateful that in my time during Miss Earth, we were part of the mayoral projects with Herman Mashaba and Solium Semanga in Joburg and Pretoria, respectively, where we'd go out and clean on a Saturday. And those were really great initiatives, a means to really get the community part of it and to have this at the forefront of a clean space to live in and just promote recycling. In terms of different kinds of projects, I also managed to go out and plant vegetables at different schools. But the project that I'm most proud of was at a school in Mamelodi, so Namapias Primary School too. And how it came about this is that I actually met their vice principal at the time through a CSR careers event. And I was there promoting for Miss Earth, or rather educating about Miss Earth. And when I'd met her, she spoke to me about this and she said that this was something their school could really benefit from. And so we started off quite small. I went in and I spoke during assembly. I taught students about recycling, about taking care of their school. We then did a very small cleanup where we cleaned up some of the litter on the school grounds. And then I did some work planting with the grade sevens. We then planted some fruit trees, which were thankfully sponsored by Sanbi. And we planted fruit trees across the school in hopes that it would not only bring shade, but also food, because in
Mhm.
communities like Mamelodi, a lot of children were only getting food when they would come into school every day.
Mm.
We also did work through the tuck shop. And the last project that I am really proud of is that we did a major clean in the area adjacent to the school. So it's really important that students are able to see that their community is well taken care of, but also the role that they play as young learners. And sometimes we take for granted just how much kids know. But really,
Mhm.
if you start at a young age, when they're able to understand the impact and how this can affect their communities, they take this home and they're mindful of this. So they are able to actually call adults to order in certain things. And so when we got cleaning in the community, we were picking up around in the area. We had the police force involved in all of this and the community
Mhm.
members. This really came to show that the little actions can go a long way. And I'm really proud to say that the school has since established a sustainability committee and that they're still doing ongoing work to be able to continue to green their community around them, but also to protect the school environment as a whole.
It is a beauty pageant, right?
No, it's not. So, in fact, Catherine, the director, as I mentioned, characterizes it as a women's leadership program. So, in South Africa, it is not a beauty pageant. And Catherine's reasoning was that you would never ask a woman to be in a bikini in a boardroom. So, she never ever got us to model in bikinis. It was never a beauty pageant. It was
Mhm.
about your impact in the world and how you could go out and change your communities. And I'm so grateful to say that I am the Miss Earth South Africa first runner up for 2017, and my
Wow.
official title is Miss Air. And in the entire journey, not once did I have to put on a bikini and parade around, but it was all about the actions and the ways in which we
Well,
could change
good
our
on
community.
you. Good on you. And the thing is, when I saw the Miss Earth, and because there are a lot of these pageants going around, so I needed more understanding. I looked at your Facebook, and well, I saw a little bit of dress up there, and it was probably like a gala evening to
Yes.
celebrate. Okay, that's
Yes. So
marvelous.
they do host a gala event. So the final event is a gala event where they do announce the winners. So every year there were four winners. So the four elements: earth, air, water, and fire. And so
Mm-hmm.
it goes accordingly from winner to first runner up, second runner up,
Oh,
and third runner
beautiful,
up.
beautiful.
And they also did have ambassadors. But Miss Earth as a whole is part of what they call the Big Six pageants. So, in the world of pageantry, there are six most prominent pageants, such as Miss Universe, Miss World, and Miss Earth. So, on an international stage, Miss Earth is definitely a pageant. But in South Africa as a whole, the aim was that this would be a women's leadership program to be able to support women to make a difference. It was a phenomenal journey, and I'm really so grateful for the experience. I learned so much about myself. I think one of my biggest takeaways from being part of Miss Earth was that I am more than just a scientist, that as a scientist who worked daily in a two-piece overall with safety boots, I could suddenly put on a pair of heels and characterize myself as someone different. And I always said in going through that I wanted to be more than a scientist. I wanted, yes, my science to make a change, but I also wanted to be intentional with the actions that I was doing outside of
Mhm.
the lab.
You have a good balance. You work and you play. That's good.
Yeah.
That's great. You're also a fellow of Black Women in Science. Can you tell me more about that?
Yes, definitely. So, Black Women in Science was started by the late Ndoni Mgunu, and this is just such an exceptional platform. It's so unfortunate with the passing of Ndoni recently, but she essentially created this platform as a means to encourage women, especially women of color in South Africa, in the field of STEM. So, as historically known, STEM is a
Mhm.
very male dominated field, or yeah, consists of male dominated fields rather. And particularly for women of color, this is something that's been very difficult for historical reasons in terms of funding or access. This is not something that women of color or even people of color generally could go into. So Ndoni created this space, and essentially I look at it as a safe space for women to go into to be able to support each other through shared experiences. But
Mhm.
the platform was so much more than that. It was also a space to be able to grow. So we had different workshops throughout the course of the year targeted at science communication, scientific writing, and there was also a means to support entrepreneurial endeavors. So, if you had an innovation, we had a workshop on how you could develop this, how you could get funding for it. And it really was targeted at supporting you, not only as an academic, but holistically. And so, being part of this program was phenomenal. I met so many great women who I'm still in contact with. And it was so great to have this kind of network because not only do you have these shared experiences, but it means that when you're going through difficult times, you have people you can relate to. And I'm really grateful for it because some of the women that I met through this program really supported me throughout my PhD and encouraged me in the difficult moments. And they also kept me so grounded in my faith. And for that,
Mhm.
I can only
Mhm.
be so grateful to Ndoni. As I mentioned, she is late, but it's really amazing that what's come out of this is now the development of a postdoctoral fellowship in her name. And so I
Fantastic.
believe that this speaks to what you said about our legacy not just being, in our own children. And this is the
Mhm.
legacy that Ndoni has left behind. And the impact she's had on all of our lives is something we really can't quantify. May she rest in peace.
Marvelous. May she rest in peace. She's left back quite a legacy. because here you are talking about it and it will reciprocate for generations to come. And I think this is a marvelous organization and may the work continue. So,
Yeah.
who are your heroes or sheroes in the world's history and why?
So when I thought about this, I realized that whilst I do admire so many of the people who've gone before and we're grateful for all that they've done in terms of women's rights and human rights and Freedom Day and all of the likes, that in fact the people that I look at and that I'm really grateful of and that are my heroes, as it may sound, are the people that I've been privileged enough to share a meal with. My real heroes are, as I mentioned, my great granddad, late past S.R. Paul, my father, and my mother. And for very different reasons, but all with the renowned fact that they were all brave and fearless and in all of the things that life has thrown at them. And that for me was why I have them as my heroes, because it's easier to relate to them, but also because I've had a personal relationship with them. And when I was always going through difficult times, they've always encouraged me, yes, in different ways. But at the end of the day, it's been more relatable to have had conversations with them about this. And so, yeah, my real heroes.
Very humble young woman you are.
Thank you.
Very, and your background is very much an authentic one
Very
about
much
how to
appreciated.
live a wholesome, ordinary, but great life. And that's what this show is all about. And here you are, and here you are. You've recently graduated with your PhD in chemistry. Where to now?
So I am really blessed to be able to say that I will be starting a new job in London on the 6th of December. So I'm
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be taking up the role as an innovation consultant and grant writer. And essentially, what this means is that I'll be helping to support companies to acquire funding for their innovations. So, in my PhD, I am really grateful that I had quite a lot of experience in terms of grant
Mhm.
writing, having to write grants not only for my experimental costs and my studies, but also to fund my personal subsistence. And so having that experience really did pay off in terms of where I'm going now. In the long run, I really would like to be able to still continue to do work in the space for energy. So I'm still involved with the Commonwealth Youth for Sustainable Energy Transition. And I hope to be able to diversify and eventually go into a space of advocacy and policy. Because of my background being in energy, climate justice, climate advocacy, I
Mhm.
really would like to be able to go into that space and hopefully advocate for better renewables, and for this transition that we're going through right now to be able to have a just energy transition. That specifically, like, developing countries like South Africa were able to get on top of this revolution essentially that's taking place.
So, if someone watches this and wants you on their team of scientists, how can they contact you? Have a LinkedIn?
Yes, I do. So LinkedIn is also my full name, so please do
Okay, great.
search
I think for
for
your
me.
professional life, anybody wanting to connect with you professionally, will your name's been advertised and your full name.
Yes, please.
Okay, marvelous. So that's taken care of. And finally, we know with your background and studying and just being in academia for so many years, you started at the age of 20, now you're 30, so that's 10 long years. So here's the thing, what was the last book that you read just for pleasure?
So I think I have to start off by saying that I never really understood people that could read multiple books simultaneously. And then I got to a point in my PhD where I just needed an outlet and I needed to be able to read, like you said, for pleasure. And so I started reading different books. Fiction was definitely my safety net. It could allow my brain to quite literally switch off at the end of the day. Otherwise, I was going to sleep thinking of my graphs and waking up looking at my graphs. And so fiction was really something. But in having recently completed my PhD, I've had a bit more brain capacity. So I did start reading a bit more of those intense kind of books. I started on Homo Deus, which is the sequel to Sapiens, but I will admit that it was a little bit energy intensive and mentally challenging for me. So I actually found a recent book. It's called Humans. It's by Tom Phillips. And yeah, I started this recently. I've not yet finished it, but it is a great take on the world as a whole. And it's done from a very comedic point of view, which really makes it easier for my brain to grasp. Sapiens was hard to read, especially in terms of commutes. If I was trying to read it on the bus or in the plane, I really felt like I had to reread pages and go back. But yeah, Humans has been a lot easier, especially because of the comedic standpoint that Tom Phillips has taken. Um, and I am really excited for this. I haven't started on this yet, but it's a book called Lessons in Chemistry. I have seen that it is also on Apple TV, but it's about a chemist named Elizabeth Zott. And so, yeah, really excited for a female chemist yet again. So, different
Oh,
books for when my brain needs something different.
do you have formulae written on your fridge and your walls? Do you wake up in the middle of the night?
No, thankfully, I haven't reached that level of crazy scientist. Yes. I do have a nerdy sticker on my laptop that says genius with all the letters written out of the periodic table.
Mhm.
And I have a a shirt that's got some chemical apparatus on it. But other than that, no formula written in random places. So fingers crossed, still a little bit sane and not crazy scientist yet.
Dr. Orielia Pria Egambaram, may the world remember your name. This is only the beginning of a journey where you've put in practically blood, sweat, and tears. And may God open every door your heart desires, every single one,
Thank you very much.
because you have such a beautiful spirit and such a caring heart as well. The way you talk about your grandparents, your parents, your brother, just family. That's care. That's real care. It starts inside first before we reach the world. And you have that. And you also have the capacity to heal where healing is needed. And I hope you make those great discoveries. Being a chemist, anything is possible. So who knows? Who knows what the future holds for you? And keep doing what you're doing. Just keep doing what you love and keep doing what you're doing. And the Lord bless you. May He bless you over and above.
Thank you so
And
much.
yeah, and thank you. Thank you for making this time in your very busy schedule. I know it's very cold where you are right now, and you're
Yeah.
all bundled up and you have your fire going there and you've cozied up. Thank you for that. You know, this is it's a sacrifice for us to experience your life in this short moment, and you've shared with us. Therefore, I pray that you have the desires of your heart according to Psalm 37, verse 4. May He give you the desires of your heart because you delight in Him.
Thank you.
And, and that's what I leave you with today.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. And you've been such a joyful guest. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time and for your kind words, and God bless you. I really appreciate all the kind things that you've said. And I'm
Thank
so
you.
humbled um,
Oh,
for all of the kind things that you've said.